Hello, this is Andrew Faroba, and welcome to Horn Sessions. This is the second interview in our Meet Your Teacher series, and I'm sitting here today with Rob Johnson at the beautiful, awe-inspiring, and world-class Bard Music Festival in Western North Carolina. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rob. We just met a few minutes ago. We had never met before. I'm really looking forward to doing this. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on this really fun, cool, awesome project. Congratulations on your success with it. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How's your week been in Brevard so far?
Busy. It's been busy. Yeah, I'm playing principal horn in the orchestra on Copeland Third, which I've never played principal on, just fourth horn, so I'm happy to take the reins. And I taught like 7 or 8 students and gave a master class for the high schoolers, and it's been busy. It's been good.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that they're loving having you here and getting to know you and learn from your vast knowledge. Well, let's go ahead and jump in here with this interview. I know there's a lot of people that are really keen to hear from you and learn from you. So where do you teach right now, and how long have you been teaching there?
So I am based in Houston, Texas, where I have a job in the orchestra, and I've been at University of Houston for 12 or 13 years, and then I teach privately, really sort of talented high school students and some adult students. And then this next year, I'll be team teaching at Rice University, my alma mater, with Liz Frymouth and Go Williams.
Are you looking forward to teaching in Rice?
I don't want to say it's a dream come true, though it is a dream come true, but it's there's a lot of meaning there for me because I went there for undergrad and grew up in the hallways musically, and my wife Ariel and we met there, and so it's a special place for us.
Wow, yeah, I met my wife at a music school as well. It's probably a very common story. So whenever we go back and we visit, our alma maters, there's so much emotions connected with those places when we go. Yeah, so for now, why don't we go ahead and focus on University of Houston, U of H is what we'll call it, for this interview. So can you tell me what is your studio size there? How many undergrad, masters, doctoral students, etc.? And just out of curiosity, are there any teaching assistantships available there as well?
Yes, so there's about 20 horn players in general, maybe 15 to 20 at UH in general. There's another professor, Gavin Reed, who's like first call freelance in town and was a Northwestern grad, and this is just a great guy. He usually does the lion's share. He has about 12, 13, 14 students. And then I teach usually around 5 or 6. It's a real mix. Generally, they're all performance majors, though it's not a requirement. I have ed people come in from now and again. And I think this next year, I'll have one incoming freshman from Interlochen. I'll have an artist diploma who just finished up at Colburn. I have a continuing DMA student who is on the verge of winning another job. She actually won a job when she was at UH, but she's going to come back. And then I have a second-year master's student who's coming back. And then I have a transfer from IU who will be a junior or senior or something like that. So it's kind of runs the gamut in terms of age and all that.
Wow. So students that are coming back, that I find particularly interesting because that's not something that I hear about very often. Would you be willing to disclose a little bit about what's bringing those students back to school after being out in the world?
Yes. So with the DMA in particular, she did an undergrad, she grew up in New York, an undergrad at Manus. I could be wrong about that. Manus, CUNY's Stony Brook something. And then she did a master's at NEC. And then she was dead set on coming to UH. This was in 2019 or 2020, and then the pandemic. So she was like, I'm just going to stick around, wait this out. So just when I had her in the net, she slipped out. But then, so she waited, I think, a good 2 years, something like that, until we were all back in person. And I think the week before she moved to Houston, she won a job in the Navy band and decided I told her, I was like, the Navy will be there. You can easily win that again. Let's see, with a couple of years of intense study, what you can do after that, right? And so I think her first year at UH, she won second horn in Baton Rouge, which isn't a full-time orchestra, but we all have to start somewhere. And usually the first domino that falls, there's another one after it. And so she's still around, and she subs at the Houston Symphony and does a bunch of great stuff. And so she came back. The student from Colburn, I think he sort of ended his time at Colburn and was looking to stay. He's an international student looking to stay in the States. And we met through I have a student who's at Colburn now, and so they kind of met each other and talked about UH and the program and how much my student there had enjoyed it. And so they come out of the woodwork. It's very exciting. At UH, we always see this very late spring, after the auditions have commenced, swell of students who, for whatever reason or another, like didn't get into their dream school, or something changed with the school, or they are having second thoughts where they are. And so we get like an influx, like a late influx of candidates who usually come to me. It's nice. I like them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny how we sometimes call them backup schools, and I was in a similar situation going in for my undergrad, that I auditioned for 2 really big schools and 1 backup school. 2 big schools didn't work out, and going to that backup school ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Yep.
Yeah, as my dad would always say, bloom where you're planted.
Yes.
Yeah, great advice. So yeah, that's my advice to anybody who shows up at U of H and you didn't think that was where you were going to be. All right, so let's go into what your teaching schedule is like. I know that you're busy with the Houston Symphony, so I'm wondering, do you teach regularly on a weekly basis, or do you end up having to skip some weeks in order to facilitate your performance schedule? What does that look like for you?
So I've done it a couple different ways. I've done where we take horn class to schedule everybody's lessons for the next week. And so I'll bop in Thursday for an hour, Monday for a couple hours, that sort of thing. And then recently I've done set times where it's just really by the book. I think it's better for me and better for the students to know when exactly their time is every week. There's sort of less, questions about it. And you get a full 7 days between lessons. And, so at this point, I'm really like Mondays I'm at UH, and, I'm only there for 5 students in the studio class. So it's quite easy to do. And I think the students like that concentrated. They can sit in on each other's lessons. They know when all the lessons are. They know when studio is, and we can just kind of keep it simple.
Consistency is key, as every horn player knows.
Yes.
I'd be curious to know more about what ensemble opportunities there are for horn players to participate in at U of H.
So there's a lot. We have the orchestra, and then the orchestra splits in the winter into an opera orchestra and a chamber orchestra. We have, I think right now in UH, it changes sometimes every year. There's 2 bands. I think it's symphonic band and symphonic winds or something like that. And then I don't think I've had a student do, but there's like jazz band, and there's a brand new mariachi program, which is really interesting. I don't know if horn players do it or not. Of course, there's the marching band, and I think if you're in the marching band, they give you extra scholarship. Because UH has some terrific sports teams, the kids, they love being a marching band, and they travel around. But it's not a requirement. Usually my students don't play in marching band, but there's a lot of chamber music groups. I think there's a brass ensemble starting this year, so they're really busy, the students, yeah.
Well, now that we had a chance to learn a little bit more about U of H, let's focus on you. So I'm curious to know, why did you decide to play the horn?
I wish I had like this amazing exotic story. I really don't. And it's funny because my wife, she's a flutist, and she has this beautiful story of she grew up in New York City. And every Christmas time in New York, when it snows and it's so picturesque and beautiful, she would put on her little girly dress with her best friend and do their hair in the barrettes. And they would go to the New York City Ballet and see the Nutcracker. And she was like, 8 years old, and was like, what is that sound? And it was the flute, and she had to play the flute. And so she has this wonderful romantic story. And me, I was a product in the suburbs of Cincinnati of like terrific public school band programs. And so I started violin before school when I was in 4th grade, and continued to play violin through high school, really. In 5th grade, I started the alto saxophone and played that through junior year in the jazz band. And then in 7th grade, I had Mr. Nordyke, thank you very much. I had an extremely influential band director who I thought, I'm going to be a band director. So that's my career in music. I love it so much. I need to learn all the instruments. So he started me on trumpet, which I took for about a year. And then they needed horn players at the high school. So my high school band director came in and said, does anybody want to switch or learn a new instrument? And my hand shut up. So I started horn in like 8th, 9th grade. And it was the one that I think I was the best at, the easiest at, the quickest, and the soonest. And so I just took to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is a very common story, at least this particular part about playing trumpet before playing horn. I know there's a number of band directors that will not start students on the horn. They will only start them on the trumpet. gauge which ones have the most, I'm going to call it, innate musical ability, and then allow them the opportunity to switch to the horn. What was that process like for you? Do you remember? You said just now that it was relatively kind of simple. You took to it, you did it well, but do you have any recollection of it being confusing, being awkward? I mean, bells pointing the wrong way and all of those kind of things.
I think it helped. My high school band director was a horn player. He was a Bowling Green grad, and so he was very much like right next to me, just being like, do this. And my best friend at the time also switched to horn for that year. So we were like kind of two peas in a pod, and he was much better than I was, much better. And luckily he went back into saxophone, and I stayed on horn. I mean, I remember there was the high school band director. It was a big deal. We were a nationally ranked high school band, and whenever the high school band director came to the 9th grade school, it was like very scary. And everybody wanted to impress him, and he had this big reputation, and he's a sweetheart, but we didn't know that at the time. And he said, horn player, pointed to me and was like, play me a C chromatic scale. And, I'd like to think that he knew what he was doing, where he didn't say start on middle C, go only one octave. It was just this open-ended, do a chromatic scale on C. And I just fiddled on up to high C and back down, not really knowing what I was doing. And I think he just sort of thought, oh, this is really like, okay, and took an interest in me and offered me some private lessons. And, it just, I remember just it sort of being easy. And as soon as he felt that I was ready to move on, there was the teacher in Cincinnati who all the serious high school horn players studied with. And it just blossomed. It was kind of a step-by-step thing where it was, first chair in band, and then you go to the top band, and then it's all state, and then you take private lessons, and it's solo ensemble and all state, and it kind of just worked. Youth Symphony, and I just bloomed where I was planted.
Wonderful. Yeah, so many horn players have these humble beginnings. I think when you see this refined product on stage, you're led to believe that that's how it's always been, or that person had it easy, or they've always been able to do this. And it's nice to get these origin stories that you realize, no, everybody just kind of started in the same place, and we just didn't give up.
Right.
Yeah, and we owe so much of that progress and that success, as you were saying before, to our band directors. So yeah, huge thank you. I'm in a similar boat where my first 3 years of lessons on the instrument were from my high school band director when I was in middle school, who was a trumpet player, George Winger. And yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Winger.
Yes, yeah, we owe them much for sure. So for you, I'm curious to know a little bit of your background with teaching. When did you start teaching? And at what point did you sort of decide that you wanted to be a collegiate level teacher?
It's a great question. I mean, I think I started teaching, I remember there was something in the water in our local school district where we had a lot of excellent high school musicians who went on to become major players even now professionally. And I remember there was, I'll tell you, Catherine Turner, who's now principal of the Montreal Symphony, was previously principal in Baltimore, was second in Montreal, like a monster. I think she was a freshman when I was a senior in high school or something like that. And I remember and I don't want to take any credit, but I remember I was coaching some of the younger horn players on the banks. I think I was section leader. And so I think kind of something started there. And of course, having great high school teachers and high school band directors helped me. And then I think once I got to college, to Rice, I saw that I wanted to do, my ideal career was have an orchestra job and then do solos and chamber music on the side, do summer music festivals in the summer, and then get that college teaching job. Mm. And, I think I was in Houston for a year or two before UH offered me the position. And I remember it was the fulfillment of a long-held dream. I could not believe it. I just love that I could finally teach college. I think I wanted to teach college because that's where I was serious in high school, but once you get to college, you become really serious and really passionate, single-minded and gazelle-like focus. And I had this really kind of now I can give back what I've been given so much of. I can now give it to the next generation. I mean, the next group of horn players who choose to work with me.
Yeah, I want to target something specific that you were saying there about when you were younger and you were section leader and you had this opportunity to lead others from such a young age. I had a very similar experience to that, and it was just so pivotal in the beginnings of launching the ideas of connecting what you're learning to how one teaches. Because there is no learning through osmosis. As we all know, you have to take what you're told and do something with it. And so when you're doing that sort of self-instruction and trying to progress, that's when you learn how to teach. So if you can make that connection when you're younger, that's it. That's it right there. So it's so cool that you had that opportunity. Very, very cool. Big advocate for that for anybody who's listening. So I feel like this next question, what experiences do you feel shaped you the most as a teacher? You may have hinted on some of those things already. Is there any really, really powerful memory that stands out to you?
Totally. So my wife, Arielle, and I, we began dating like immediately freshman year. And we've been together kind of ever since. And her parents are both teachers. In fact, they run a music school for young, gifted string players in New York. And, I, of course, wanted to fit into their family. So I would, I had the cred that I was a musician, so I understood what they were talking about. But for all the family dinners, all summertime we were with them, all winter break when we would be with them, the currency around their family dinner table was like they'd talk about their students and they'd talk about what kind of teachers they were looking for and how the students best learned and, what were they doing in studio class. And I think of course I was the benefit of great horn teaching, but a lot of, I think, how I teach now is from those dining room conversations where it was like, how can we best support this student? What does this student need? I can meet them where they are. What can I do? What not to say in lessons? Don't get in their way. And I think a lot of what I do now it's based on those dinner time conversations, and we have them now still. All we do in that family is talk about music all the time and teaching. So it's a really kind of a way of life, the teaching.
That's so wonderful to hear. It's amazing how those past experiences can be utilized, to us as teachers. There's also the element of our own musical heroes that maybe someone that's inspired us recently or maybe inspired us when we were younger. Would you be willing to share who perhaps some of your musical heroes are?
Totally. No, it's interesting because when I was a young hornist, I only listened to horn recordings. And when I got to college, I remember thinking like, oh, there's other music that doesn't have horn. Like, I can't believe it. And when you listen to non-horn players, the sort of shackles that are put on horn players just in terms of physicality and fingers and repertoire and sound concept and breathing, they all just go out the window. It's like great works of art. You finally get, they're there waiting for you. It's like until you've listened to Don Giovanni, like you haven't really started living yet. And it's nice because it's waiting there for you. So I found that as soon as, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And all of a sudden I had all of these like vocal teachers. So everybody, like Kathleen Battle, she has like a wonderful recording of Bach where it's like you just listen to it. It's like there's no horns anywhere in there and it's awesome. My children now, we love listening to the Magic Flute of Mozart. And there's some terrific like Thomas Quastoff recordings where he's like just singing away, and it's incredible. I definitely wanted to say outside of the Houston Symphony, when I park in the one spot and go by the one pillar, there's a plaque of Marian Anderson, and one of her first performances was in the Houston Symphony, or was in Jones Hall, where the Houston Symphony where we play. And I always sort of look at that plaque as I walk in from that one direction, be like, gosh, it's like Marian Anderson. It's like unbelievable. I mean, it's, I think that at this point when I'm listening, because, we spend our careers listening at work. So like kind of the last thing I want to do is put on music in the house or put on music in the car. So I don't do a lot of listening. But when I do, I want my heart to just be right there. I want it to just overflow. And of course, Pavarotti just... every time he opens his mouth, I just start to cry. It's just like this unbelievable. And so I try constantly to tell my students, please listen to string quartets, please listen to opera, please listen to, some of these vocal, beautiful instruments that, are all around you and all very accessible due to technology now.
Wow. And when you do listen attentively. So I think we both know that when it comes to being a teacher, there are two sides of the coin. There are the things that we love. And then, of course, as with most things in life, there are some things that we don't like. Could you tell me, what do you like the most and least about being a teacher?
I'm very lucky at UH where I teach private lessons in horn studio class, and that's it. But I'm aware that many of my colleagues have a lot of kind of paperwork responsibilities and a lot of sort of administrative duties that are less than fun. So I'm very lucky. I don't have to worry about any of that. I imagine that that's probably not the most fun stuff. it's very easy to mirror back what students bring to lessons. So if somebody's having a bad day, or if somebody is kind of over it, or like not wanting to be in that lesson that day for whatever reason, it can be tough to sort of pivot to a place that is not trying to solve the personal issue, but trying to remain in the music, in the present, and trying to sort of help them get through whatever it is they're going through musically, and trying to get them over the hump in terms of like, let's go to a place where we're inspired again. Let's get into a place where we want to be here again. So I think that's a great challenge of teaching when, it's week 9 of the semester and they have like midterms and like they stayed up all night and they couldn't practice all week and they, the dog ate my homework and all this stuff, where it's just like, it can be tough. Like, students have real lives, and they really, you can almost set your clock to the semester in terms of when they start to struggle. Certainly, the pluses of teaching, they're too numerous to name, but certainly, when students achieve success by their own definition, it's the greatest feeling in the world. It's like, it's wonderful. It's wonderful when you hear that sort of sparkle on their voice and see their eyeballs and how excited they are. And certainly helping them with what they perceive as their own failures. Getting up from a failure is also sort of equally, you got to have the mountains and the valleys the same. And so when I try to tell students, when you're at the mountaintop, remember the valley. When you're at the valley, remember the mountaintop. And students, they cycle through. And I sort of love, I think, one, being a witness to all of it, and also just trying to help and assist and create an environment where they feel like they can be safe and where they can flourish.
Mm-hmm. This next question is one of my absolute favorites. What 3 words do you think your students would use to describe you as a teacher? And before I let you answer, I should disclose, I have contacted one of your former students to ask what 3 words they would use to describe you as a teacher, which I will let you know after you answer.
Oh my God.
We'll see how close you get.
This is like the wedding newlywed game. Oh gosh. I want to say, I don't know, maybe intense. I want to say like funny/nice, like something in there. I try to like keep it upbeat. Intense, funny, nice, and I don't know. Gosh, I wonder who it is. I wonder when they were one of my students. And demanding. I'll go demanding. Why not?
You're pretty close. So you said intense. One of their words was direct. You said kind of funny, nice. Their word was awesome.
Oh.
And the last one they put was reliable. Reliable, quite a compliment there. What do you think about those 3?
I think that's very nice. I wonder who you talked to.
My promise was that I would not disclose.
Check in the mail
to answer. Yep. So I lips are sealed. Will not say. So this next question is a little bit of a deep dive, perhaps, into your own philosophies around teaching. What is your primary objective when you teach?
It's a great question. Of course, I want the student to get better. I think that's maybe a cheap and easy answer. I think beyond that, though, and maybe a better answer, I want the student to feel seen. I want to feel that they're supported and that they're safe and that they are, I'm invested in what they're doing, and that I don't want them to rely on me, but I want them to feel like they have me in their corner. I think that's it. Because I think until I'm able to help facilitate that environment, we're not going to get much done. It's easy to talk about bowstring and airflow and like different finger aims, but like the deeper the lessons and the longer that they've been my students, I hope that they really kind of know that I'm invested in them and that they feel seen and safe.
Yeah, to foster that sense of trust takes work.
Yep,
for sure, from both sides, and meeting of the minds in the middle. And that's when incredible things happen. I think that's what all teachers are shooting for. The destination is easy, but how to get there is as complex as humans are, for sure. The next question is a little more basic. Do you follow the same curriculum for every student? Why or why not?
I don't. Well, I don't think I do. I don't follow the same curriculum now. I don't follow the same curriculum. However, every student that comes to me, even now, I think I have someone who's 17 or 18 and someone who's 28. So I think those people don't really need the same thing, although maybe they do a little bit. But I'll say the curriculum of like efficient buzz stream, sound first, like solid concept, details, like all that's kind of par for the course. I even think some of the same etude books that I would use, but I want to say that all the lessons seem different to me. I mean, I hope that the students don't think that I'm sort of vanillaing all of them, but I mean, my teachers growing up, they always said they taught by gland. And so if they hear something, they assign something. If they hear something else, they're going to assign something else. So I think part of me is like that.
So it sounds a little bit like you may be saying the same thing from student to student, but you would say it in a very, very different way.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, the mark of a wonderful teacher is the variety and the skill to understand how to say something based on, hopefully, an immaculate understanding of what that student needs. So what is your take on equipment? Let's assume, you got a freshman showing up to U of H and they walk in with such and such form. Are you the kind of teacher that takes it and throws it against the wall on day one? Or are you kind of cool to sit back? How do you make those decisions about when to bring up those discussions and if they're necessary?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So when a student already purchases a horn, that's fine with me. In Houston, we get a lot of high school seniors who auditioned for us in February, March, and they've been playing on a school and instrument for 5 years. And they say, wait, UH won't give me a horn? Hold on a second, like, I need to buy a horn right now? So in that case, I'll sort of guide them to like a Geyer-style wrap, brass horn, a middle-of-the-road mouthpiece, and like, depending on whatever their budget is, we sort of go from there. But since I've been at Brevard here, I mean, everybody has a different horn. And I sort of look and like, what kind of horn is that? What kind of horn is this? And it's very interesting to me because I think there's so many options out there now. I think there was options when I was more of a student, but there's a lot more now, and the prices come down a lot. So I think students can really make the decision that works best for them. I mean, we're lucky in Texas. We live close to Houghton Horns, who has like 50 horns on a wall. So a lot of times I'll just say, just go up and talk to Dennis and like, take your mouthpiece and have at it. Yeah, but no, there's no requirement. I mean, probably the closest thing I can do in terms of insistence on equipment is I talk about right hand position, because I think that really makes a difference much more so than is it lacquered, is it not lacquered, relatively how big is the mouthpiece or, yeah.
Wow, I'm so jealous that you have Houghton. Interesting tidbit, Derek, who I believe is a co-owner there, or part owner there, Derek and I were at Brevard.
Oh.
Yeah, my first year, this would have been 2009.
Oh.
I believe Derek and I were both in the studio here.
Cool.
So yeah, anytime I see him at IHS or Southeast Horn Workshop or something, I'll go talk to him. Sometimes I'll tell him, don't stop making this horn. I don't really like this one.
Yeah.
There's something along those lines. So yeah, I've sent a number of students over there that have purchased horns from there. So yeah, big advocate for Houghton. Really appreciate what those guys do.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to get your thoughts on transposing. If you did a search on transposition on horn people, on Facebook, you would get a tremendous amount of opinion. Some for it, some against it, for a variety of reasons. What's your take on transposing? Do you think we should all read off of F parts? Where do you stand on this argument?
I think we should all transpose all the time. Yeah, I end a lot of lessons, and maybe I'm giving away one of the secrets here, but I say pick a number between 1 and 68. And the students, they always say whatever number they say, and I will, 24, like in a very kind of like, I can't believe you picked number 59. And they, of course, like the color drains from their face, and I open up the Arbon's duet section. And if I'm feeling particularly generous, we will read it in F, but like on the F horn. That's something. But I'll say, okay, let's read this in such and so. Or I say, do you want to read this in D or D flat? You tell me. And you want to be on the top line or the bottom line, and let's not stop. And I think transposition, is so important. I mean, when I was in high school, I had the Mozarts that were all in F. And I had, the Horn Players Edition handbook, which was great at the time in terms of mobility and had all the excerpts, but it wasn't like the real music. So I think it's just important for students to see the music that they'll see on the job. And I tell them, I mean, a lot of my students, they get called for church gigs. And oftentimes you read off the hymnal page and they'll ask you to read the trombone part, and you're reading in bass clef C alto. And it's like, if you want to make an extra $300 a week playing in a church gig, you got to learn C alto bass clef. If you're going to learn one transposition, that's probably the one that'll pay you the most.
Yeah, I love that everybody consistently brings up the church gig, and it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. Let's see, if it's me in the harmony book, I'm going D, not D flat, and I'm definitely going lower line and not upper. Because in my mind, they're on the same staff, and so I don't want to transpose the upper line down into the lower one.
Yes.
Paying for the visual transposition aspect.
What's amazing, though, is that most students choose the lower line, which never has the melody. So I'm always like, okay, you chose it. It's always the ba-da-dee-dee, and I'm,
Yeah, things are larger. Yeah. That's okay. I'll take it. Oh, man. So I love these next two questions. They kind of go hand in hand. And I always ask people to be honest. Do you regularly attend your students' performances? And do your students often attend your performances?
Yes, I encourage students to come to the Houston Symphony every week. And the Houston Symphony has it's like a $50 all-access pass where they just show it and they can get into 90% of the shows. In terms of me going to my students' performances, whenever I can, I do. Certainly recitals, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've missed a student's recital, and that would be just like their parents were coming in from out of town, and the only time they could do was such, and I have the Houston Symphony concert I can't miss. And in terms of the large ensemble concerts, they're usually on Friday and Saturday night, so I don't get to hear them as often as I want to. But I did hear Rite of Spring recently that I thought, good for these students. They're really, they knocked it out of the park. I thought, good for them. So yeah, I think they come to hear me more often than I come to hear them.
That's how it is. How far is U of H from Jones Hall, where the Houston Symphony performs?
It's really kind of great, actually. Houston has invested some money into a monorail train network. And so there's a direct train from Moore School Music right to downtown Jones Hall. So it's probably maybe a 15-minute, maybe 10-minute train ride.
Wow.
A few miles.
Ultra convenient. Love it, love it. No excuses.
Yep.
Gotta go.
Thank you.
So let's imagine we've got some listeners here that are thinking, I like this guy. Maybe I'd never heard of UH, or maybe I had, and they're just learning a lot more than they knew before. And they're thinking, I'm going to audition there. Can you tell them anything about what the auditions are like at U of H? And what qualities do you specifically like to hear from a player in those auditions?
Totally. I think of all the schools that I've come into contact with, UH is very easy. Our requirements are, I think it's something like 2 contrasting pieces. When you get into more the master's or doctoral, I think there's a time, we want 30 minutes of music or something like that. But I wouldn't let any of that scare you. I always tell students, they say, what do you want to hear? I say, I want you to sound good. I want you to put your best foot forward. Don't try to impress me. Just play great. That's what I want. In terms of the auditions, there's a few different audition days. I think there's one in the fall. So we have an early decision, something or another. And then there's always a couple days in the spring. The audition committee, it's usually Gavin and myself, and then 1 or 2 of the band directors. We don't use piano accompaniment, sort of one at a time. That's not blind. Each audition lasts probably 10 minutes or so. We do chat. We try to make people feel comfortable. And I think the students, for better or for worse, they see that the committee's kind of joking around. We're very friendly with each other. So we're trying to put everybody at ease. Hopefully we don't, distract people with our shenanigans. But I think the auditions, and I always encourage students, please reach out and take a private lesson either before or after the audition. Doesn't matter to me when you do it. I say, if you do it before, we can help you with putting your best foot forward. And if we do it after, I can always sort of help advocate for you more. If you felt that you'd had a poor audition or didn't do your best, I'll open up the hood and tinker around a little bit, and we can really have a better understanding of who the player is. So I think the auditions at UH are, I think, about as positive as they can be, considering it's, a pretty big day in the student's life.
Some very, very helpful inside tips for anybody who heard that. I highly recommend you take him up on his advice. So let's assume we've got a student and they're adamant, I'm going to U of H, that's my dream place, that's what's going to happen, and they're all engines full speed ahead. And they're kind of wondering what they can do before they get there to find the biggest advantages that they can once they're there. Is there a subject or aspect of playing that you feel like incoming freshmen are most deficient in, something that someone could be working toward as they approach college?
Totally. I think a few different things. I think one thing that the student might be most deficient in, they a lot of times aren't listening to enough sort of historical horn sort of recordings, and they're not printing off the parts and listening to like the great symphoniors that recorded them and listening properly with like headphones and a pencil and marking stuff and that sort of thing. So I think oftentimes we'll play like horn trivia in horn class. And I'll say, who was the section in Charlotte? Who was the section in Atlanta? Who was the section, like, name me anybody. And sometimes the students, do excellently. Sometimes they're able to like at least knock off the principal, and I'll go, who's the principal before that? But sometimes I'll push them, and sometimes they don't know. They're able to say sort of me, and maybe one other person from Houston Symphony, and I'll turn around and say, if they're from Houston, I'll say, and can you name me the quarterback of the Texans? And can you name me this person? So a lot of times, and they can often have great success, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I hope to sort of illustrate that if this person wants to be a professional horn player, you better believe that if it was a high school or collegiate athlete, they would be all over knowing the professional roster and where they went to college and, their stats and everything. And it's, so I think there's a sense of knowing, whose shoulders we stand on in the past, not just who was the flavor of the month currently sort of winning all the auditions. I think that is sort of something that we should know those people too, and we should know who came before us. Well, so there's certainly that. I think by and large, we get a lot of Texas-based people at UH, although we do pull from international, but there's a strong band culture in Texas that the kids get the all-state music on like July 1 at noon, and the website always crashes. And so they spend days, months, hours each day throughout the school year until that February audition, learning these really challenging etudes sort of inside and out. But I think that does help foster accuracy. I think it does help foster kind of a competitive spirit. I think it does help foster, completing the work, like learning the whole page. And it does so, I find, usually at the cost of musicianship, and it does so at the cost of really learning how to practice these etudes, and it does so at the cost of putting sound first. And so I find a lot of times, and not just with Texas kids, but like they do a great job getting their gold star and completing their work. And they're very concerned about nailing that high C, or they're very concerned about like not missing that note right there. And a lot of times, I think in my teaching, we find musical solutions to technical problems. And if I sort of like distract them from their own priority lists and convert them to mine, accuracy is a byproduct. And not missing that high C is a byproduct of being an efficient player, focusing on music and focusing on sound.
All very, very helpful advice. Let's pivot here a little bit to talk about student health. I think we all know that the path to walk to becoming a professional musician on any instrument is a tedious one. It's difficult, it's tough. And the one person that we often have to rely on to hold our hand on that long journey is our private teachers. So I'm curious to know, how do you help your students to avoid or deal with burnout?
Totally. So, we're lucky at UH. They kind of saw the writing on the wall during the pandemic, a little bit before, but during the pandemic and after, where somebody's really struggling and it's sort of outside of my purview in terms of horn, they can have professional help at a moment's notice on campus. So I think that might be a separate conversation. In terms of burnout, it's another great question. Again, I think we get to those parts of the semester where everybody has an exam and everybody has a jury, and there's 4 concerts that week, and they happen to have a Christmas gig they're so excited about, and all of a sudden it's like their chops kind of give out because they just practice too much or practice the same amount even though they're performing hours and hours. So, I try not to wait until the student is burned up to address burnout. I think it's important that like part of your daily routine is having fun on your instrument. My teachers always used to say, you never tell people you work the horn, you tell people you play the horn. And play by definition is fun and easy. So if you're not doing some kind of fun, easy session or part of a session in your horn warm-up or in your nighttime session, whatever, I would encourage everybody listening, myself included, walk the walk here, talk the talk, that we got to have fun on the instrument. And if you make playing efficiently part of your daily routine, even if you're not 100% efficient, just try to get a little bit more efficient each day, you can hopefully try to avoid the burnout. And also, there's the whole, when you can, it's the power of saying no. I mean, just, instead of putting in that last practice session of the day, go for a walk, go for a swim, go out to eat and like have some spicy food, like do something. And I also tell students in terms of their bodies, like if the most physically exerting thing you're doing is playing your horn, like go to the gym, like do something else where like it's making you like lifting weights or cardio, something where you're getting a workout in, and that'll help, of course, with the dopamine and, just making your head feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that you're actively encouraging your students to pursue those interests outside of music. I'm a mountain biker. I did in high school, raced competitively in college, and continue to ride my bike when I can now that I've got 2 little kids. But, do my best. But it is the great equalizer. It's so necessary, in my opinion. So I always love to hear when that active encouragement is there. Yeah, so wonderful. Do you have any thoughts on or experience with playing injuries? Assuming that were to happen, how do you guide your students to recovery?
Totally. So, again, it's sort of like the elephant in the room. Nobody really wants to talk about it, but I do try to address those topics before they're happening. Before somebody gets injured, you want to talk about becoming injured. You want to talk about making sure that you practice an appropriate amount and practice an appropriate time length within those amounts, like a 50-minute hour, and you got to take a break for 10 full minutes. In terms of if somebody is injured, I mean, the rule is if it hurts, you got to stop. And if you continue to play while it does hurt, you'll likely injure yourself more. So even if you're in the middle of like a rehearsal and band, like you got to like fake it. Put your mouthpiece in your pocket so you're not tempted, and go up to the band director and your teacher afterward and say, look, I'm really sorry, but like, I'm bleeding. I'm like, something's happening right now with my lip and I need help. I remember when I was at Tanglewood in mid-2000s, I was doing some high-velocity air attacks again and again and again and again, and just like blowing my face off. And I remember I popped a blood vessel underneath my upper lip, and I lifted up my lip, and it was like this purple like vein. And I thought, oh no, like it's over. It's over for me. And, luckily the BSO guys, they were really gracious and sort of shifted me to lower horn parts so I could still play lower. And it's the whole idea of you don't have to practice, like warm up 15 minutes before the rehearsal starts. And you don't have to practice after the rehearsal. It's okay to do that. And in many ways, it's often freeing to do that. And, the body heals. And what's nice about the mouth in particular is that it heals faster than the rest of the body. And so making sure also, again, that, on the same lines of exercise, I like to make sure that I'm eating right, drinking lots of water, making sure that the foods that I'm putting in my body are like anti-inflammatories, if at all possible. I'll tell my students who are particularly struggling, I say, you're allowed on the way home, like get a popsicle and just put your lips around the popsicle, like use ice. Or you can use like alternate hot water in your sink and like cold ice. Don't put the ice directly on your lips, it'll burn you, but like you got to put like a paper towel in. You can alternate for like 2 minutes at a time, as much as you can stand it. And then of course the whole on the horn mentality has to be, you have to start from a place of ease and continue to grow that place of ease. So even if you're able to play one note that doesn't hurt, that sounds good, that is like properly produced, that's fine. And the next day you get out a half step. So I think a lot of what I do in my maintenance and my nuts and bolts and my fundamentals every day is it's easy, efficient playing. That's what I have to do. And I try to, get better 1% each day.
A lot of wisdom in there. I'm learning a lot just listening. In closing here, I've got a couple questions for you as we get to the end of our interview. If every student could only learn one thing from you, what would you want it to be?
It's funny. It's like you're asking me for only one. I don't know if I can do it. I was thinking there's like maybe one on the horn and one off the horn. So I think maybe on the horn, to be able to fulfill emotionally to the audience what you're feeling inside, you've got to like play it by your heart. You've got to like, if the people aren't tearing up in the audience, like we need them to be tearing up in the audience. Like you have to be able to express on the inside in an effective way to communicate to those who are listening. So I think there's that. Off the horn, I think I want the students to try to be like 10% kinder to themselves. Because I think that's what I want for myself. 10% less anxiety, 10% kinder, and 10% less worry. Just like my wish for you is that you can have a little bit of a lighter head.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, this is our last question here. Is there anything you typically say to those graduating from your studio before they leave?
You know, I wish I had like some beautiful speech that I could give. I mean, I really, I just say, stay in touch. Like, I remain invested. I want to just see you. I'll miss you. I think I always say I'll miss you. I'll miss you. I think to a certain degree, if we sort of time it right and there's a studio party and like there's like a going away, because a lot of times the students, they stay in town. So it's like, well, I do see them and I'll see them at work and I'll see them around, but I do like to sort of think about and communicate to them like the legacy that they left at UH in the studio, and like, you know, how we all benefited from them over the years, and sort of what they meant, not just to me, their personalities. It really leaves an effect on the studio. And, you know, I like to sort of talk to them about their legacy.
That sounds like a lovely way to end. So to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. The last thing I'll ask you is, let's imagine someone really, really liked something that you said or had more questions about something that you said. What would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Totally. So I have a website where it's robertjohnsonhorn.com, and there's my phone numbers at the very top, and just give me a call, send a text. I'm not on social media, so I have to do the old fashioned way of just reaching out, and I'll be there. I'm there.
All right. Thank you, Rob, very much. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
Pleasure.
All right. Awesome.
You're amazing.